I think that individuals with ADHD seek dopamine very often. And where do they get that dopamine? But from social media. So it would make sense that if they're on TikTok and seeing these shorts or reels, whatever you call them, I'm not on TikTok really, or on Instagram, and they're seeing these things and more about ADHD, they might be able to self-identify.
Damn, let's talk some shit.
It's Polly Siegel
and Victoria Aaron,
two licensed therapists who've spent way too much money on degrees, certifications, and trainings. We both love what we do and couldn't imagine working in any other profession. But we're forced to be serious all the time, and that gets boring. Shit Talking Shrinks discusses important mental health topics, the human experience, and society at large, while poking fun along the way. It won't be all fun and games because after every episode, you'll walk away with tangible tools to navigate life more effectively.
We love a tangible tool.
Hello, everyone. Oh, we have such a good guest today. I basically had to bribe Brooke to come on our podcast. I was like, I'll do anything you want. Seriously, just come on.
I feel so blessed. Wow. I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah, I was very eye on the prize. I really wanted your work and your expertise and your magic on Shit Talking Shrinks because, before we get into content, Brooke, introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you, Polly and Victoria. So my name is Brooke Schnittman. I run a ADHD coaching company, Coaching with Brooke. It was started 5 years ago, and we have 8 coaches. We work with all ages and focus on ADHD one-on-one and group coaching. And my background in ADHD actually started in 2006. I graduated from NYU with my master's in students with disabilities. And then I was a teacher, special education teacher for 7 years in New York, and then 4 years as an assistant director of special education. But when I was in the assistant role, I realized that I was pulled away from the kids. It was more of a paper pushing, combative role. And I didn't like it. It's not why anyone becomes a teacher, to be on the sidelines and make policies. So I quit a golden handcuff job at the best school district in the country. And I came to Florida to start my own business. And after a year of figuring out what that business was going to be and being coached, I decided to be an ADHD coach, got my certifications in that, and then learned I had ADHD.
Come on.
Plot twist.
I know. Yep. So people are like, did your life change when you got an ADHD diagnosis? I'm like, nope, it didn't. Because I've been doing this and I was coached. And so anyway.
Which segues into our topic of ADD, ADHD. What comes up for me around this topic is it was overdiagnosed in the 90s heavily.
Mm-hmm.
That takes us down a windy path. But, it was so diagnosed then. And then I feel like there seemed to be like a little bit of lull. And now it's like full throttle again, where every single client that I'm seeing is, I have ADD. I'm so distractible. I can't, sustain focus. I'm jittery. Like they're self-diagnosing and it's full throttle. And then they have all this consumption through social media, whether it's Instagram or TikTok, and they're learning about ADD or ADHD that way, and then more self-diagnosing. And it's just a term that's tossed around so much. Like, oh, I'm so ADD. Like, oh, it's my ADD. And I guess in this episode, what I'm really wanting to jump into is like, can we define it? Can you share more about what do symptoms look like and sort of the process of navigating that particular diagnosis?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a medical diagnosis. It's complex. And even though sometimes it could be misdiagnosed, it's still underdiagnosed.
Really? Even in the 90s?
Yes.
Wow.
So in 1994, the term ADD changed to ADHD. So that's the umbrella term now, as I'm sure you ladies know, because this is what you do for a living too.
And I'm diagnosed.
Yes. So listen, my answer when everyone says there's an overdiagnosis, I say there's an overdiagnosis, an underdiagnosis, and a diagnosis. So yes, sometimes people are misdiagnosed because people are not every therapist. And you guys you know a lot about ADHD, but not every person diagnosing knows everything about ADHD. I went undiagnosed for my whole life until I realized that I had it after seeing many psychologists and psychiatrists who diagnosed me with anxiety and depression. So I'm not knocking anyone, but not everyone knows about it. So
interesting. No, I appreciate you correcting me because I think the narrative is that it was way overdiagnosed and people were getting on stimulants left and right, and that there was a huge problem around that.
There is a problem around stimulants, and that's part of why the FDA is cutting down on how much Adderall and how much Concerta they're producing.
Right. Because there's no concurrent treatment. It's just like, here's 25 milligrams of Adderall. Oh shit, here's 30 milligrams of Adderall, but you're doing no behavior modification. You're just now fucked up on stimulants. For me, right? I was taking 175 milligrams of Vyvanse. It felt good. I was like zooming.
Yeah. So, a psychiatrist's role is to, if you need to be treated with medication, they'll give you medication, but their role is not to give you tools. The role of giving behavioral tools comes from a therapist or a coach or a mentor or whatever. And if someone thinks they're going to get a quick fix off of medication, they could, because medication is sometimes the first line of defense. It really changes the dynamics of your brain while you're on it, and it helps the neurotransmitters and the pathways speak to each other. However, the triage is helped when you have behavioral approach as well. So Dr. Dodson talks about, I just spoke about this the other day, how medication is the first line of defense in his opinion. He created Concerta. And then after that, the behavioral and the medication together can take you to a whole new, path. So.
But something that you don't know, Victoria, is that in second grade, I was diagnosed with ADD.
I was going to say, do you have ADHD? Yeah. Not that I could see it because it's invisible, right? But I was just curious.
Yeah. So I was diagnosed in second grade. I went through a lot of cognitive testing and psychiatric evaluation, and I am diagnosed with ADD, and I have working memory issues. I was part of the learning disability programs at DU, and I had special accommodations in high school, actually in elementary, middle, and high school. I have struggled a lot in academia. I think because of all of the coaching that I received, Brooke, as well as the mentorship and a lot of resources and intervention, I've created a system that works for me, and it hasn't hijacked my brain anymore. But I might seem like I've got it all together, but there's a lot of inner systems that I've created to be able to stay on track.
100%. And you're probably in a position right now that you love and that you thrive in too. So you've created this structure in your life, and like you said, the systems and the job and the people who are in your life that really just bring out the best in you. So you're not struggling like where in school, very often the teaching isn't meant necessarily for someone who has ADHD or who has disabilities unless you have an IEP, which in your case, you didn't say it, but I'm guessing you did.
I did.
Right? And then you got the services.
Mm-hmm.
I think teachers now are definitely, coming out of the school system. I think that teachers now are definitely getting the training, though, to teach all kids in different learning styles.
Absolutely. Well, and I can credit my teachers. I went to an all Jewish day school. I had 23 kids in my graduating class. There was a lot of eyes on me, a lot of attention, a lot of personal touch. So I wasn't lost in the system. I mean, the teachers were very close with our parents. And so they identified very quickly, it seems like Paulina's struggling. And I credit my mom because she went full throttle to make sure that I was able to thrive and be able to be successful, considering, the limitations that the universe gave me. I'm curious though, to come back to what you said, because you looked at me and you're like, Paulina, you seem, I don't know, but you seem like you have it. I'm just curious
I didn't mean that you seem that you have it. I was just curious because I had thought before we got on the podcast that you both had shared that you had ADHD. I also have working memory issues too. So, I wasn't sure. And just some of the nuances, I thought that like you guys were just saying that you had it too. You were experts in it. So that's all. I couldn't tell just by looking at you.
So anyone who thinks you can look at someone based on physical appearance and have ADD, you can't. Brooke has just debunked that.
Yes. And that's part of some of the problems in life with an invisible diagnosis like ADHD. When you have and I'm not saying one is better than the other, trust me, but when you have a visible disability, people sometimes give you a little bit more slack, right? Because they can see it. But when you have an invisible disability and you don't disclose, not to say that you should always disclose either, but you can get a lot more hate and shame and difficulties in the workplace with relationships, all of that.
Can you, because I think we're segueing into this, can you define what is ADD?
Sure. So ADHD is a complex disorder. It's a medical diagnosis, and it basically means that the executive functions in your brain, which is in the prefrontal cortex of your brain, have dysfunction. So there are 3 types of ADHD. Right now, there is ADHD inattentive type. That used to be ADD before 1994. Then there's the ADHD hyperactive impulsive type. That was a classic ADHD, boy in the classroom getting out of his seat. And then there's the combined type, which has some of the symptoms of both of the other 2. So in order to have ADHD, you have to rule out all of the other diagnoses. So anxiety, bipolar, ASD, all of these other disorders can look a lot like ADHD. Now, you could also have both of those, learning disabilities, or, the list goes on and on. So in order to be classified with ADHD, you have to have 6 out of 9 symptoms before the age of 12. And it has to appear in 2 or more areas of your life for over 6 months. After 12, as an adult being diagnosed with ADHD, 5 out of the 9 symptoms, and they had to appear also before childhood.
So that's where I think it gets a little squirrely.
Not before childhood, in childhood. Excuse me. Obviously, before childhood,
In the womb, you have to be.
When you were a twinkle in your mother's eye.
I thought about that. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. But yes, it made sense to me when you said it. But I think there's a lot of misunderstanding for clinicians around the 12-year-olds being the number. And I've heard, and I'm this might not make sense, but I'm going to try to synthesize in my mind. But I've had a lot of clinicians tell me, well, you can't diagnose after the age of 12 if they didn't have symptoms prior to the age of 12. But then when they're interviewing or doing a diagnostic evaluation with a client, the client doesn't remember what their symptoms look like before 12.
Well, that's why you do surveys with people that you know and who've known you. So when I was diagnosed with ADHD, I actually saw a psychiatrist, and she's like, no, I'm not going to diagnose you. Go to this psychologist. And I was like, okay. So I did. And she gave me a bunch of surveys. I gave one to my dad, one to my mom, one to my best friend, one to my sister. So people who've known me, for my aunt, and they've known me before 12.
Got it. So what happens if you don't have other people's subjective experience of you?
Right. So, you can go to a psychiatrist and they can, not do surveys from people in your lifetime. And you can go online and get a 30-minute diagnosis, which is unethical, right? So what happens when you can't get people around you? You basically share your symptoms, and the person who is diagnosing you, the psychiatrist, psychologist, the speech not the speech pathologist, geez, the social worker, they look at your symptoms, rule out other disorders, and if it's in the DSM-5 as ADHD, then they can diagnose you with ADHD. But to have a thorough ADHD diagnosis, it should be like at least 90 minutes where they go through all of those surveys.
Which a lot of people don't.
Yes.
I can't remember before age 12. I don't know how I got diagnosed, but I would imagine sitting down for 90 minutes would just make me fucking furious. But that's why I don't do one-on-one therapy anymore. I can't. My model with my clients is we're constantly doing stuff. We're out in the world together, right? I'm teaching them how to be sober in their element, in their environment. But like sitting across from somebody for 60 minutes makes me just want to die. I can't do it.
Yeah. So totally understand. And yeah, when I coach my clients, it's up to an hour. And very often my other coaches do it for 45 minutes, and it's because of the attention span. I mean, the optimal focus time is between 10 and 40 minutes, even for a neurotypical person.
Right.
I want to take a quick pause to talk about our sponsor, a company called BetterHelp. It's an online therapy platform where all the therapists are licensed and accredited professionals. It's affordable. You pay a low flat fee for therapy with your therapist, and it's convenient. Do it at your own time and at your own pace, and you can communicate with your therapist as much as you want and whenever you feel is needed. And more importantly, it's effective. Thousands of people have benefited from therapy using BetterHelp, and we're really grateful to offer all of our listeners 10% off your first month. So if you're interested in receiving therapy ASAP, click the link in our show notes and you can get started. And you get to save money. Is someone who's diagnosed with ADHD, does that fall under the neurodivergent umbrella?
Yes.
When someone uses the term neurodivergent, it doesn't only mean being on the spectrum.
No, ADHD, OCD, I believe, is underneath there. Anxiety, depression. Yeah, there's a lot that goes under neurodivergence.
What is your take around a bunch of people using Instagram and TikTok to really self-label and self-medicate and use that information as a self-diagnosis?
So it's a catch-22. I think that individuals with ADHD seek dopamine very often. And where do they get that dopamine? But from social media. So it would make sense that if they're on TikTok and seeing these shorts or reels, whatever you call them, I'm not on TikTok really, or on Instagram, and they're seeing these things and more about ADHD, they might be able to self-identify. Now, with that being said, I don't see a problem with someone identifying with certain symptoms. And I also don't see a problem with people self-diagnosing while they're waiting for a diagnosis, because especially now, I know in the UK, it could be like 7 years for the NHS for someone to get diagnosed. And even in the US, I'm sure you guys have long waiting lists. And there's not a lot of experts who understand ADHD. So I think it's fine to say, oh yeah, I got these symptoms, whatever, but it's what you do with it, right? So I don't believe in, self-medicating. A lot of individuals with ADHD, before they know I have ADHD, do self-medicate. And because they get that high feeling that they're seeking, right? So people with ADHD, some of them might do cocaine because cocaine does, it increases your dopamine level. It spikes, but then it drops quickly and then they want more.
The first time I did cocaine, it felt like I was normal for like, after I'd been abusing Adderall and Ritalin for a long time. And then like I did coke and I was like, oh, I can be normal now. And then it went away, of course. And I was like, oh, now I'm addicted to coke. Great.
And that's the problem with not having the ADHD diagnosis and not being able to get treatable medication and tools, because unfortunately, some people take these paths that, lead them down to addiction.
But here's the thing too, right? Like I had all the tools, I had all the resources. It's that I'm an addict. So like for me, when a doctor put me on a stimulant, right. And I was in therapy and I was doing all of that and I was really young. Right. But like the way that my addiction and my ADHD held hands was like, we're not letting go. We're in it for life,
Yeah. I mean, addiction doesn't go away, correct?
Yeah, no. I mean, in my personal belief system, no. And I believe, and that's why, for the most part, well, not for the most part, entirely, I'm unmedicated. I'm untreated when it comes to ADHD, besides, 11 years of a mindfulness practice. And having my own, like what Paulina said, having my own systems. It is frustrating, right? Like I'm so good at helping other people organize their lives. I'm so good at helping other people, right? But like when it comes to me, it's like I have 800 emails and I'm like, can't look at it. Got to hit the vape. Got to scratch my head. Got to move my body. It's like it's just it's something that I'm still like navigating through. And the busier I've gotten and the more my business is built up, the more I'm like, holy shit, like this is serious,
Mm-hmm.
It's a serious thing.
It is. It is. Yeah. So I don't see, back to your question, Paulie, like I don't see an issue with people identifying. I think it helps them build community. I disagree with people saying, oh, I'm so ADD or I'm so ADHD. Even if you have it, it's like, okay, own that you have ADHD if you do have it, but also it's not your excuse, right? Like it can be your explanation. Do something about it. I'm sorry, but like,
right. Do something.
People with anxiety, depression, people with other disorders, they don't just say, oh, I'm so bipolar, like they do something about it, hopefully, or they treat it. I think it's wonderful that it's being more acknowledged and, not as stigmatized, even though it still is. And businesses are learning more about it and how to work with their clients and their colleagues. But I think we all need to take responsibility after our awareness, and it's not easy to live with ADHD. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
But let's not use I'm so ADHD as an excuse, because then it unvalidates the people who are really struggling with it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it also, like how I'm understanding what you're saying is it acts as a mask and an excuse in a way to like step out of responsibility or acknowledgement or even accountability. And I think that inherently that's problematic. What, like if someone, and I guess coming back to the social media piece, the reason I ask that is because as a clinician, it can be very challenging when someone becomes so fixated or attached to a diagnosis as a label. And they come to me and I get my, I'm doing my diagnostic evaluation or my intake. And they're like, well, I've watched X amount of, reels
and people get really upset if you don't diagnose them with ADHD, right?
Yeah. And I have it and I know I have it. And, yes, I need a formal diagnosis, but you don't really know what the fuck you're talking about because social media confirmed it for me. And I'm going to be honest, like I have an issue with that.
Oh, totally. As you should. Hey, listen, I get tons of DMs saying, I'm so upset. My therapist didn't diagnose me with ADHD. Now I don't know what to do. What do you mean you don't know what to do? Like speak to your therapist and figure out some other ways, some other tools. Like you could still have some of the symptoms of ADHD. You could be disorganized. You could have task initiation problems. You could have emotional issues, all like dysfunctions of your executive functions. But as an umbrella, you're not labeled ADHD. Doesn't mean you can't get a lot of the same tools that people with ADHD have. You just might not be prescribed a medication because you don't have ADHD.
Sure.
And you could still like connect with posts about ADHD. There's nothing wrong with it, but don't fight a therapist about it, or go see another therapist and see what they have to say. And if they confirm that you also don't have it, then maybe they're telling you something.
Right. Right. And as the clinician sitting in that seat, I'm not in any way upset that those symptoms are real for that person or that it's creating interference in their life and there's clinical significance to it. That's irrelevant to me. But I think when someone comes in with so much force, with so much certainty, with so much like desire to want to own and sort of keep that script near and dear to their heart, it creates a little bit of a challenge in creating intervention around it, especially when there's a lot of exploration that needs to be done.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are attached to that solving their problems. Okay, it's just the ADHD. Okay, now I have that piece that I can, that badge that I can hold on to.
Yes.
It's not just me, it's my ADHD. So I think that separation is really hard for someone who isn't diagnosed with ADHD. It's like, oh gosh, it's not ADHD. Now what? Like, is it me? Do I have something else?
Right.
So that unpacking might be really difficult for someone who thinks that they have that badge.
Right. And I think you've said it beautifully. It's people coming in with that badge of honor and clinging to that badge like it's their lifeline.
Yeah.
I think we sort of have to be curious about that to really see like what's underneath that. Why does that label hold so much weight to you?
Well, because it's a validation of symptoms, though. It's like we're all looking. I think I'm hearing you, right, and I think about my own life. We're all looking for that one thing, like, oh, it makes sense. That's why I'm like that.
I just got off of a coaching call last night with someone. Actually, 3 people were on the call who shared the same story as my husband or my wife were going to leave me. But then I found out I had ADHD and now they're understanding more. I'm like, oh boy.
Wow.
Okay. So they understand you have ADHD and like you're going to, right. So your symptoms are there still, right? Whether you have ADHD or not, so they can recognize it as ADHD and maybe that helps them be a little bit more considerate and accepting of certain things. But you still have certain weaknesses and you still have certain strengths. So how are you going to work with that? And how are you going to try to make yourself feel better, not your spouse? Because you still have like this brilliant genius in other areas. So like if you're constantly now working to fix your marriage with your spouse so they are happier in your marriage, but you're not working on your own self-acceptance and your own strengths, it's going to be really challenging. You're going to get stressed, anxious, and depressed.
Right. That's an important point. If someone, has gotten a formal diagnosis, has been able to really engage in the process thoughtfully and has that awareness and knows that that's what's really part of their navigation of the world, what are tips and tricks? Maybe I'm not asking this in the most graceful way, but how do you really conceptualize it? What type of skills and tools can you use and implement? If someone was starting this journey, what's your guidance around that, Brooke?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if someone does get the ADHD diagnosis, let's say from their therapist, then they can decide whether or not they want to, seek out medication or not. That's totally up to them. But also so that's a tool, but also that's not going to help you create systems and structure. So there's a lot that you need to unpack and like weave out So, okay, I have this shame surrounding certain things. Now, let me focus on areas of strengths and let me figure out what those are. Let me make sure that I am doing everything that I need in my current role to thrive. Is it the right role for me? Do I want to do something different? Like, how do I work with that? I see a lot of adults who have difficulties in their job. Do I need to seek out a coach? Do I need to seek out a mentor? Do I need to seek out a consultant? Do I go to a support group? Support groups are huge. I found that we have different ADHD group coaching services. And I found that with the group, people feel more supported and they're like, okay, you're my people. I realize I'm not alone. And you did these things to help your ADHD. Okay, there's hope. So I think that having some sort of support group, whether it be like a structured support group, a membership, or, if there's on ADA, there's like $5 a month support groups. So you follow an Instagram page that you love, see if you resonate with them, and then maybe reach out to them and see what kind of services they have. But CHADD, CHADD, ADD.org. Those are two really good organizations that have support groups, and CHADD has free support groups that are local.
Brooke Schnittman.
Brooke Schnittman has support groups. Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate that. And Attitude Magazine has really amazing webinars, and it's free, and articles as well. So they are up with the most current research, and they have experts there. And I also run an ADHD Ed Camp, which is free, with experts around the world. And perhaps you guys can join me next October. And I do it for people just to spread awareness. I've been doing it for 4 years now, and it's been amazing.
That's awesome.
Like, there's also a level of like making friends with it, right? Like, instead of,
yes,
instead of always being like, oh, it's my ADD, I'm so disorganized, I just like don't know how to do it. It's like, let's like make friends with it, right? Like, I know that I have shortcomings, right? And so like, how do I actually use those shortcomings to my advantage? How do I like,
yes,
flow with it? Because there's such like a demonization of it, and like it's so much shame, and it's like, why don't you just shake hands with it? Be its buddy.
Yes. And I think that we get stuck in these negative thought loops and have a hard time getting out of it. And that's where a friend or a mentor or coach or a therapist can really help you just take a step back for a second, so you can look peripherally, because that's really challenging when you're just stuck in the weeds, whether it be weeds in your thoughts, weeds in your paperwork, weeds in your just daily life. It's like Groundhog's Day all the time for people. It was like that for me before I knew I had ADHD. And so people feel bad about giving themselves time and permission to just be. Like, again, yes, in yesterday's call, one person was like, I don't know how to just be. I don't know how to just be and think. And I have to be doing a million things. I feel like I'm not productive if I'm not doing it. So people aren't giving, and they don't know how to make friends with their ADHD, because like you said, friend or foe. Same thing with stress, friend or foe. You can use your ADHD to an advantage. I do believe that you can. If you can tap into the hyper focus, but also make sure that all the other things that you have scheduled for the day get done at a different time, or you're funny, you're creative. There are so many strengths of people with ADHD. They can problem solve. But yes, again, we have to focus in on our strengths, and then we delegate our weaknesses, or we try to eliminate them, or we break them down, or get, accountability and support for that.
Brooke, do you find, and I am asking this question with very little knowledge, so take that with a grain of salt. Do you find that there's a correlation or maybe a causation between perfectionism and ADHD?
Definitely.
Could you say more about that?
Yeah, we have this all or nothing mindset. And so that can get in the way of perfectionism. I also think that because of shame surrounding our past, we are afraid of giving out like the result and getting negative feedback. So we try to kind of hold on to it until it's quote unquote perfect, which it never is. And then to avoid, rejection. We also sometimes with big things underestimate or overestimate how long it's going to take. Sometimes we don't see the path to get there too. So breaking down steps can be really challenging. I use the classic case of laundry. Laundry is just not doing your laundry. It's separating, putting in one load, getting the detergent, then switching it over after 30 or 45 minutes, and then hanging up your clothes, then taking it out, then folding it, then hanging it up. There's so many steps, and we have a hard time visualizing time and also being accountable and that shame.
Right. You know what I sometimes, and this is my own self-work, as again, I had a lot of resources, a lot of intervention from a very young age to help me navigate my learning disability. And I truly do not know who I'd be or how I would operate in the world without those resources. So thank you, Mom, and all the people that helped me. Special shout out to Netta Crashen. She was a phenomenal teacher that I will never forget and helped me a lot.
Isn't that amazing? You remember those teachers?
Oh, yeah. Netta listens to our podcast, so I hope she listens to this episode.
Oh,
yeah. But one thing that I've done, and Brooke, I don't know if this is a technique that you and your team use, but I try to, when I find like the procrastination or that really overwhelming sensation of like, I don't know where to start. I'm looking at a mountain and I'm not sure how to get to the top. That's like my experience of ADD or ADHD is just I get so overwhelmed with all the tasks and the to-do lists. I try to go inward and I use IFS, internal family systems, for this, where I'm like looking at that part and being really curious about that part internally because I can feel it physiologically in my body. Like I can feel that intense anxiety and that disorganization. Or almost like a paralysis. I feel this paralysis where I'm like a deer in headlights. And I like ask that part questions like, what do you need from me? What do you want me to know? Like, how can I support you? And I get really profound answers in those states. And so I guess I'm inviting listeners to be curious that like your body and these intricate parts that make up who you are will tell you and guide you if you slow down and you get curious. And for me, that's been profoundly helpful in managing my ADD. So I don't know if that has any like truth or evidence behind it, but I thought I'd share it.
Yes. Like, what do you need from yourself in the moment? But when we are so emotional, not everyone can do that, Polly. So like, if I know people who need to just take a step away from whatever it is that's tripping them up that they can't get started with and go for a walk, do something else, and then come back to it and then ask those questions. So some people can do it in the moment, depending on their emotional level on a scale from 1 to 10. Are you a red? Yeah, no, there's no way. But I love those questions. I love them. I think it's great. I actually, in our emotional regulation group, we do those questions, but typically it's from what do you need from someone else when you're getting defensive?
Yeah, I would encourage looking into IFS if that's sort of a new modality. It is wildly life-changing, like truly the most impactful modality I've ever learned as a clinician, but also as a practicer. And we learn so much about these internal systems and responses. And if we listen to them, we will find answers and we will move forward.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Anything else, Brooke, that you as we sign off, anything else you want to say on this topic that you feel is imperative for our listeners?
Yeah. If you're at any stage in the diagnosis process, like it's valid. Again, if you aren't diagnosed with ADHD, perhaps maybe you go to another practitioner and you get diagnosed or you don't get diagnosed. But again, as we've talked about, like it could be very validating to have a diagnosis, but remember that's just a name and there's symptoms that go along with what you're experiencing. So treat the symptoms. It's okay, and there's lots of places out there that can help you. Just find the right professionals. And if it's not, with you amazing ladies, then I'm sure you have someone that you can recommend to people, right? Or again, you can do your research on Instagram. And then what I would say is before you solidify who you want to work with, do a little bit of a background check and also see if they resonate with you.
Absolutely.
And you feel comfortable with them.
Yes. And know that Brooke is a resource to all of you. Like we invite fabulous guests because we want our listeners to have more resources and more access to really quality care. So all of Brooke's information will be in the show notes. If you feel like you're struggling with, ADHD, you have a fabulous woman, a Jewish woman by your side.
3 fabulous women. Me too. Yes. Well, I would love, this was really wonderful. And thank you for the insightful questions. And I know you're traveling, so I appreciate the fact that you guys made this work today.
So fun. Thanks, Brooke.
Give your sign off, Victoria.
Big, big love, everybody. Big, big love.